Today I'm going to invite you into the Purple House in Sugarloaf for a shop tour. Is the house haunted? Come in and see. I have wanted to live in Sugarloaf all my life, even before I knew about its haunted history. But honestly, had I known about that ahead of time, I would have wanted to live here even more. Sugarloaf is actually very, very old. The way we know it now really started in the 60s, but its origins as an agrarian community are way back pre-Revolutionary War. So if you look around at the buildings in Sugarloaf, a lot of them have been built around the 1700s, early 1800s. This house itself was built in 1835, so it's probably considered to be one of the newer houses. Sugarloaf as we know it now is a live-work community. A lot of the houses are going to have a shop in the front, and then you're going to be living either in the back or you're going to be living over the shop. Because of that, there is a great deal of creative energy that comes in, and that does attract spiritual attention. That does attract paranormal activity. There are very well hidden family graveyards. There are ley lines that pass directly through Sugarloaf. That has a lot to do with why people feel so drawn to the area, but also to this house in particular. I have a tendency to do a lot of energy treatments over the entrances to our shops because I want people to feel like a positive experience as soon as they enter through the door. When people come in, they usually remark on the energy right away. Because of all of the activity in the home, people will tap into one or the other. I don't think the paranormal activity is negative in any way. I've always felt a very positive experience. I feel like I'm living with a lot of people, even though most of the time I'm the only one in the house. I have a lot of company, but I do feel that it is very friendly company. So when people talk about the house being haunted, I usually say that it's spirited, but not necessarily haunted in the way you would think it's haunted. But it most definitely is. So this is the foyer, this is the entrance to LightClub. You may feel a shift when you first enter the foyer, but it's really when you make the left and then you start entering the shop. And now we are entering the main shop. Then all of a sudden, you start to feel the stirrings because that was the original living room of the home. This has had many, many incarnations. There has been glass blowing here. There has been a cafe. There has been a florist in here. There has been an angel shop in here. And whenever you shift a room, whenever you change the energy of a room, the resident spirits may or may not be okay with it. And I remember when we inherited it, we were told, okay, there's going to be times where stuff is going to be flying off the shelves, it's going to be a little chaotic in here, you may have a difficult time with employees from time to time, they may not want to be alone. We never really had that experience. When we first looked into buying the home, we made a point to ask the house if it was going to be okay with what we were going to do with it. And the moment I asked, I noticed that the sale went through very easily because the home was finally being acknowledged as to, what was going to be there. It was finally given a choice. And I think that has a lot to do with why we have flourished here as much as we have. It seems to like what we've done with this shop. There have been several paranormal groups that have come in, set up spirit boxes, echo boxes, any type of communication device, and we've repeatedly asked, and they have answered, that they like what we're doing with the place. They also have a great sense of humor, getting a very big kick out of us selling things that help with clearing the paranormal energy, even though we never use it on them. So I can tell people how to clear a house, but I don't clear my own because I like the company. The very first time that I cleansed the home before I moved in, and I did a very, very elaborate cleansing. I started from the basement and I went all the way up to the attic, did everything. We moved in on New Year's Eve, so that's absolutely a time when you definitely want to make sure you're cleansing your home, whether it's haunted or not. And I specifically remember when I went through the home and I said, as long as you are okay with us living together, you're more than welcome to stay. And I said, and anything else that feels like it needs to move on at this time, please do so now. And I just kept saying that over and over and over again. I noticed that the house had kind of made itself known about who was there and who wasn't. There were a lot of sleepless nights in the beginning because the house was talking to me constantly, talking to my husband constantly, who was not used to that sort of thing at all. But we definitely enjoyed the company. The cat was okay with it. It just felt like a comfortable boarding house. Is really the energy of this home. I seem to have gotten very lucky with the main resident spirit here. Her name is Frances. She was believed to be the housekeeper and very, very protective of the home, to the point where many of the residents here say that she was sighted looking out of one of the top floors of the house at night when nobody lived here at all. And they were still seeing someone looking out the window. I've felt her presence exactly where they told me it was. She's been detected many times from many different paranormal groups. I think we've had at least 4 different paranormal groups here. They get so much information, they always have to come back for a second round. And they have all detected the same things that I was told when we first moved in. Frances is very active in the shop. And you can tell when she's around because you will smell roses. It was believed that she cleaned with rose water. When she's happy, you'll smell the roses, just out of nowhere. Just a big, overwhelming scent of roses. When she's not happy with whatever's going on in the room, you'll start to see things fall off the shelves. The only time that has happened is when I'm away and I don't tell her where I'm going before I leave, and then she gets upset. I didn't believe it at first. Many mediums were telling me this. I said, well, I don't understand why she would be so upset if I left, but apparently she's very protective of me, is what I've been told. So when I came home after one such trip where I was being told that everything was just very chaotic in the room, I came back at night, I addressed her directly. I said, I'm home, I'm not going to be going away for a long, long time. And it was silent in the room, and I just heard, and I knew everything was going to be okay, and we haven't had any issues since, unless I forget to tell her that I'm leaving. And that's my fault, that's not her fault at all. The other interesting thing that a lot of people don't know is that Sugarloaf was also a confirmed stop on the Underground Railroad. There was a route that went to Canada, because even though there wasn't necessarily as much tension in the north, there was still a lot of cases where people were trying to capitalize on rewards. So Sugarloaf was a known haven as a stop on that Underground Railroad, and this house in particular has some evidence of that. There were actually tunnels underneath the buildings in Sugarloaf. The slaves were brought towards the church, and then at night they would be snuck out to here, which served as the parsonage for the church. And then they would go underneath, down through the basement, and a tunnel would take them across the street so they could cross the railroad tracks and follow them up to Canada. This is the basement, and down here is where the tunnel is. I believe that this house has the only existing tunnel left. They had to be filled up because as soon as cars started to be in common use, the weight would have caused everything to collapse, so they had to be filled up. There's another resident spirit. We just call him the Undertaker. We believe that he worked with the church to hide slaves and bring them in so they could escape. And this here is the Violet Flame Chapel. You know that he's around when you start smelling pipe tobacco. And none of us smoke in here, and you'll just all of a sudden start smelling smoke. You're gonna notice it the most in this room here, which is now the chapel. And that's where you're gonna smell the presence of the Undertaker. My husband noticed him a lot when we first moved in, and I sighted him upstairs. And I usually don't sight spirits. I have to be really overtired or something. I usually sense them more. My husband was downstairs I was upstairs. I came down into this room, which is now the chapel, and I told him about this spirit that I saw. And I told him I was smelling the tobacco and everything, and it was really cool. And then I left because I had to go somewhere, and I left him alone in that room. So 2 hours later, I came back. He was still in the room, sitting there, afraid to move. He just would not leave the room. He'd been finished painting maybe an hour before. And I said, "Why are you still here?" And he said, "Well, I don't know if that's upstairs, downstairs, whatever. All I know is that in this room, I'm okay. I'm not leaving." In this room, the chapel, this one is the most original. It has the least amount of electricity in it. It has the original plaster on the walls. The floor is original. The beams in the ceiling were actually from trees that were cut in the backyard. You can look closely and see the hatchet marks on them. And because that room is the most original, I think that leading into the red room, those two, they've been the most untouched, and therefore any type of spiritual activity is the most comfortable in those two rooms. The chapel was several shops in its own, and we even tried a few things in there before it became the chapel. A crystal room, all of our books in there. None of them seemed to work until we created the chapel. The chapel seems to be what the house wants. It likes that concentration of energy there because this is a very active part of the house, so you've got that pyramid right in there just pulling in anything. It's almost like Grand Central Station in there sometimes, because with all of that sacred geometry going on in there, pulling in all of this energy, it just makes it easy for any type of activity to pass through. Then we noticed that the door between the room for the chapel and the red room seems to be a portal. If I have anybody in either of those rooms, they'll always know it's a live activity by the door. And the red room used to be the kitchen for the original home. Whenever I've had any type of investigators, they don't want to leave that room. They'll hook up all their machines, they'll ask questions direct, they get direct answers. The level of activity in the room is absolutely insane. It doesn't help that I'm also doing readings and mediumship sessions in there constantly, so I'm adding on top of all of that energy that's already there. But in a way, that's a good thing because I'm working with the home and not against the energy of the home. So if that wants to be a hub of activity, well, I'm just going to add to it. And anybody who gets a reading in there is always going to get a great deal of feedback, and they're going to feel what's going on. So whenever I'm able to do a mediumship reading in there, you get a lot of results. Luckily, I have enough of the stuff in the house that ensures that it's only positive energy coming through. I have not had any negative type of activity in the home. There might be things that would startle other people. We're so familiar with the activity in here, it just feels like friends or relatives coming to visit. And often it is. They just happen to be on the other side. The home has turned a lot of non-believers and skeptics into believers. With the amount of investigations we've had in here, I think there will be plenty more to come.